All right, 40 days through the Bible, day 31. This was Obadiah through Malachi, through the end of the Old Testament. And inside of here is the book of Jonah. And the story of Jonah just cracks me up. So this is one of those things that I feel like for the longest time in my life, I completely misunderstood, right? Because it's like God speaks to Jonah and he says, go to Nineveh and tell them that I'm going to bring all this destruction down on them because they're so wicked, right? Jonah runs away. He goes on the ship. There's a big old storm. The guys are like, dude, they cast lots. They're like, hey, the storm is your fault. Why are you, what did you do? And Jonah's like, I'm running away from God. Throw me overboard. They throw him overboard. He's swallowed by the fish. In the belly of the fish for 3 days. The fish spits him out. He goes to Nineveh, preaches to them. They repent, right? And at the end of that, in somewhere around chapter 4, I think it says, when God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. But to Jonah this seemed very wrong, and he became angry. He prayed to the Lord, isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? That is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. But the Lord replied, is it right for you to be angry? And the story of Jonah is one of these things that because we want to think good about ourselves, we automatically think good about Jonah. And so for the longest time in my life, I thought that, Jonah fled and didn't want to go to Tarshish because he was afraid he was going to go there and get killed, so they were enemies of the Israelites and stuff. And it was dangerous and whatever. And it's while that was a factor, right? The Ninevites were very much enemies of the Israelites for time immemorial, basically. But that's not actually why he fled. That's not actually why he didn't go. He didn't go because, he tells us, he didn't go because he knew that God is slow to anger and abounding in love, and that he would relent from sending calamity, right? And so it's this thing where Jonah didn't go because he didn't want God to forgive his enemies. He wanted to see justice on those enemies, and he didn't want to see God's compassion poured out on somebody else. He was fine receiving it for himself, but he didn't want it to actually be poured out on other people. And what I just realized reading this morning too is that another reason why Jonah would have been very pissed at the end of this story is because when he came and he told the people, he didn't even tell them repent. He just said 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown, right? He's just like, y'all are screwed. Sucks to be you. God told me to come here and tell you that he's going to kill you. Suck it, right? And what happens is the Ninevites take it upon themselves to repent and take it upon themselves to fast and pray and ask the Lord for forgiveness. And that just had to have rankled Jonah, because when he was on the boat, when he was running away from God and he was on the boat, the men on the boat had to cast lots in order to get it all the way down and figure out that it was his fault that this storm was happening, right? He had to have the truth come out, not because he chose to tell it, but because other people forced it out of him. And even then, when it comes down to, I'm the reason that God has sent this whole storm, what I just saw this morning too is that he's like, yeah, throw me overboard, and then the storm will stop. And it's like, well, if you're the problem and going overboard will fix it, why don't you just jump, bro? And it's like Jonah was not willing to initiate and take the steps into correcting the situation in and of himself and for himself. And then he comes to this horrible city with all the worst people ever who God is totally against, right? And all he tells them is hey, God's about to wipe you off the face of the earth. And they're like, dude, let's repent. Sackcloth, ashes, fasting, all the people. Who knows, maybe God will relent and have compassion and turn his fierce anger so that we will not perish, right? And they just choose to do what he knew he should have done in the first place, right? And so when you have those two pieces, you look at it and you're like, oh, you see this end where Jonah is just pissed, right? And the book just ends weird. The book ends so weird from what you would expect. But when you have those two pieces together, you're like, oh my gosh, that makes so much more sense. Because Jonah, even being a prophet, Jonah is still a person. He was still a flawed human being. And we want to have the good things from God for us, but we don't want the good things, we don't want God's compassion and God's grace to overflow to our enemies, right? And all of us get so offended when we see someone who we think we're better than act in a way that we should have acted but didn't when we had the choice, right? So, yeah, I think that's all I have for this one. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.